If they mean that much to you, fish them out of the dumpster yourself. That was what the billionaire said. Small smile. The voice you'd use on a stray dog that wandered into the wrong yard. Around her, the men in good suits laughed. Not loud, just enough to sting. The man she said it to didn't laugh. He stood in grease-dark coveralls. Beside him, 6 engines, stacked and chained on a pallet, tagged for the crusher. He looked at them a long moment. He looked at them the way you look at a face you were sure you'd buried. His hand found the side of the nearest block. 2 fingers. Low on the casting. Gentle. The way you'd take a pulse. Nobody saw where his fingers landed. Nobody in that gutted plant knew to look. 6 engines. Declared dead by a room full of experts. A scrap ticket already signed. A deadline of Friday morning. But the woman in the $1,000 coat had missed something. So had every suit standing behind her. The quiet man she'd just told to climb into the trash knew exactly what these engines were. He knew it down to the inch. And he knew what they were worth. She thought she was throwing away junk. The number she threw away had 6 zeros behind it, and she just handed it to him. With a smile, to the one man alive who could prove every cent. His name was Eli Brandt. And on Friday, he was going to take her at her word. Stick around. By the end of this, every person who laughed in that room is going to wish they'd kept their mouths shut. The morning it started, the sky over Linden Falls, Ohio hung low, and the color of wet cement. Eli Brandt drove into it the way he drove into every morning now. Slow, both hands on the wheel. The pickup was older than his daughter. The heater worked when it felt like it, and today it didn't, so he wore the canvas coat with the torn cuff and let his breath fog the glass. He waited at the long red light on Factory Road, same as 1,000 mornings before. Across the intersection sat the place he used to call work. Drayton Motor Works, or what was left of the name. The big steel letters still ran along the roofline, but 2 of them had fallen years back, and nobody replaced them, so the sign read D. Ayton Motor Works. Gap, toothed against the gray. The lot that once held 400 cars held 9. A chain-link fence wrapped the property now. A banner hung on it, bright and new and out of place, the only clean thing for a mile. Voss Industrial, it said. Asset recovery in progress. Eli hadn't driven through that gate in 14 years. He hadn't planned to today either, but Renner Salvage took the jobs that came. This was the job that came. And a man with a daughter doesn't turn down a paycheck because it hurts to look at. The light turned green. He went. Hollis Renner was already at the loading dock when Eli backed in, clipboard in one fist, unlit cigarette in the other. Hollis owned the yard. 61 years old, built like a propane tank. He'd given Eli a job 3 years back without one question about the gap in his work history, or the shake that had been in his hands that first week. Eli never forgot that. They want it all gone by Friday, Hollis said, by way of good morning. Decommissioned assets, their words, means scrap. He nodded at the plant behind him. New owner's cleaning house. Some outfit out of Chicago bought the whole carcass for the land and the write-off. Today's a photo day. Suits coming. Try not to look like us. We are us, Eli said. Try anyway. Inside, the plant was a body with the organs taken out. Eli knew this floor. He knew where the line had run, where the heat treat oven stood, where a man named Carl dropped a crankshaft on his own foot in 2007 and cussed a full minute without repeating himself. All of it empty now. Dust hung in the light from the high windows. Their boots echoed. It smelled of cold concrete and old oil and rain coming through a roof nobody fixed. Then Eli saw the pallet. It sat near the freight doors, shrink-wrapped, waiting, the way everything waited that day. 6 engines, stacked 2 high and 3 across, strapped down, tagged for the crusher. From across the floor they looked like dead iron, lumps of metal, garbage with a pickup date. Eli stopped walking. He didn't decide to. His feet just stopped. He crossed the floor without hearing Hollis say his name. He went down on one knee beside the pallet. He put his hand flat against the cold gray block. And for a second, he couldn't breathe right. He knew this iron. He knew the curve of that intake. He knew the hand-ground edge on that manifold, because he was the one who'd ground it. He turned his head and read the others, one by one. Each one a year of his life he thought the world had thrown out a long time ago. You with me? Hollis was beside him now. Eli, these shouldn't be here. His voice came out low. These shouldn't be on a scrap pallet. Everything's on a scrap pallet today, bud. No, Hollis, these are... Is there a problem? The new voice cut across the floor like a clean blade. She came toward them with 4 people trailing her. A 5th walked backward in front of her, working a camera. The dust seemed to get out of her way. Adrienne Voss was tall. The gray of her suit was the kind of gray that costs money to look that plain. Her hair was pulled back, not a strand loose. She wore no jewelry but a watch, and the watch was worth more than Eli's truck and his house and everything in both. She didn't hurry. People who own things don't hurry. The room hurried around her. We're on a schedule, she said, to no one and everyone. Why is a man kneeling on my floor? Salvage crew, Miss Voss, one of the suits checked a tablet. Scheduled removal. They're hauling the decommissioned line today, then haul it. She'd already turned half away. The photographer crouched for an angle, the fallen letter sign framed behind her. A woman standing over the bones of something old. New money over dead money. It would look very good in a deck. Eli stood up. You can't crush these, he said. The floor went quiet. The suits looked at him the way you look at a chair that's spoken. Adrienne Voss turned back. For the first time, she actually saw him. Eli watched her take the whole picture in one pass. The torn cuff. The stained knees. The black under his nails that no soap on earth would lift. She filed him under a heading he could read right off her face. Not a person. A line item. Excuse me? She said. These engines. Eli set his hand on the pallet again. He kept his voice even. The way you keep it even around a spooked animal or a frightened child. These aren't decommissioned line stock. These are prototypes. Hand-built. There were only ever 6 finished. They're the last 6 anybody made. You crush these, they don't come back. Nobody can make them again. A beat. Then one of the younger suits laughed. A short, surprised bark. That gave the others permission, and it went around the little group like a yawn. He knows engines, someone said. Course he does, said another. He scraps them. Adrienne Voss didn't laugh. She studied him with a flat, mild curiosity. The way you study a stain to decide if it's worth the trouble of removing. And you'd know that, she said. How? Eli said nothing. There were 10 years of an answer behind his teeth. He swallowed every word of it. He just looked at her. Then back down at the iron. The silence stretched long enough that her mouth curved. I have an engineering report, she said, from people with letters after their names. It says these units are incomplete, non-functional, and worth their weight in scrap steel, which is $61 a ton, last I checked. She tilted her head. But you have a feeling about them. Is that right? A feeling. I have more than a feeling. He has more than a feeling, she repeated. The suits enjoyed that. The camera kept clicking. Eli felt the heat climb his neck and stay there. Ms. Voss, we should keep moving, no. She lifted one hand. She was looking at Eli now with something close to amusement. And amusement on a face like that was worse than cruelty. Cruelty at least takes you seriously. I want to be fair. This man cares. That's rare. She glanced at the pallet, then back. Tell you what, if they mean that much to you, fish them out of the dumpster yourself. The suits laughed. I'm serious, she said over the laughing. Now there was an edge in it. We pay $40 a ton to haul this to the crusher. You want it? It's yours. Sign the scrap weight. Pay the man your $61 a ton. Load your treasure into that lovely truck. I'll even let you keep the feeling for free. She turned to her assistant. Add it to the salvage ticket. Whatever he wants off this floor, he can have it scrap. Saves us the crusher fee. A small smile, just for Eli. Everybody wins. Then she walked away. The camera and the suits and the good shoes went with her. The laughter trailed out the freight door and was gone. Eli stood alone beside 6 engines and a clipboard. His ears rang. His fists hung slack at his sides. And he did not feel powerful. He felt small. He felt the way he'd felt for 14 years. Hollis came up beside him. "Quiet, bud," he said. "What just happened?" Eli looked at the pallet, at the cold iron, at the spot low on the nearest block, where his 2 fingers had rested without him deciding to. "She just gave me $3 million, he said, to spite a stranger. Hollis snorted. "And I'm the king of Spain." "Get the straps," Eli said. "We're not crushing these, we're taking them home." It took most of the day to load 6 engines onto a flatbed with a hand winch and a lot of swearing. When it was done, Eli wrote Hollis a check for $214, the scrap weight, to the penny. Hollis looked at the check like it might bite him. "You're paying me," Hollis said, "for the privilege of storing junk in my own yard. Rent me a bay, back corner, the one with the lift that still works. Eli, $200 a month. I'll pay it Friday with the rest." Eli wiped his hands on a rag that did nothing. "I need a place to work, and I need you not to ask me why for about 6 weeks." Hollis looked at him a long moment. Then he looked at the 6 engines chained on his flatbed. Something in the old man's face shifted. Hollis Renner had run a salvage yard 30 years. He knew the difference between a man chasing a fantasy and a man who'd just seen a ghost. "Back corner's yours," he said. "I'll throw in the lift. But the day you can tell me what the hell is going on, you tell me first." He pointed the unlit cigarette at Eli's chest. "Not the lady in the suit. Me. You first," Eli said. "I promise." That night, after the yard emptied and the floodlights buzzed on over the gravel, Eli stayed. He pulled the shrink wrap off the engines 1 strip at a time. Slow, the way you peel a bandage off a wound that's mostly healed. And as each one came clear under the work light, the years came with it. People who didn't know better thought Eli Brandt was a scrap hand who'd gotten above himself. The few who knew better knew the truth. Once, he'd been the best pair of hands in the state of Ohio. He'd started at Drayton at 19, sweeping shavings for $4 an hour. Drayton built engines. Only engines. Had built them since 1946. Old Walter Drayton ran the place like a church, and the only sermon was "do it right or do it again." The first time Walter caught Eli sweeping, he didn't say hello. He pointed at a half-built block on the bench. "What's wrong with it?" he said. Eli looked a long minute. "Deck's a 0.5 out of true," he said. "You can see it in the light, if you know to look." Walter stared at him. Then he took the broom out of the boy's hands. "You're done sweeping," he said. Eli rose through that shop the slow, honest way, year by year, until the engines coming off Drayton's prototype bench had his name on the build sheet and his hands in every seam. They weren't ordinary engines. Drayton made a few hundred a year and charged what a small house cost. Collectors waited 2 years for one. Racers, men with more money than sense. Because a Drayton ran true when everything else had quit. They said a Drayton would outlive the man who bought it. Most of them did. And the 6 on the flatbed were the last and the finest of all of them. Walter had called it the last run. 6 engines. The old man's final design. The thing he'd chased his whole life. Not the fastest. Not the loudest. The truest. Built so close to perfect that, Walter swore it would idle so smooth you could stand a nickel on its head and walk away. One winter night, after the others had gone home, Walter unrolled a set of drawings on the long bench and weighted the corners with whatever was handy. He didn't call Eli over. He just waited until Eli came. "What is it?" Eli said. "Last thing I'm ever going to build." Walter didn't look up. 6 of them. No more, no less. Eli studied the prints a long time because it was beautiful. The cleanest thing he'd ever seen the old man draw. No tricks, no show. Every line bending toward one idea. It's not the fastest engine you've drawn, Eli said. No, not the most powerful. No. Walter finally looked up, and his eyes were bright in a way Eli had never seen on him. It's the truest. 50 years I've chased it. An engine so right it doesn't fight you, doesn't shake, doesn't lie. You set it running and it just, he opened one hand. Slow, breathes, how smooth, Eli said. Stand a nickel on its head, the old man said, on the block. While it idles, walk away. Come back tomorrow, and that nickel's still standing. He tapped the drawing. That's the last run. I'm calling it that because it's mine, and it's the last, and I'd rather be remembered for the truest thing I ever made than the fastest. Eli looked at him a moment. Then let's build it right, he said. So they did. The two of them, in the back of the shop, after hours, for 2 years. An old man and the boy he'd taken the broom from. Walter sketched and re-sketched the fuel system on napkins, on shop rags, once on the back of his own hand. They got 5 of them running, each one truer than the one before it. The 6th, they got nearly there. Then Walter's heart gave out on a Tuesday. In the parking lot. And the banks came. And the market fell out from under everything that ran on gasoline and craftsmanship at the same wrong time. Drayton Motor Works, 90 years old, was sold for parts and a tax number. And the last run, the 6 finest engines old hands ever made, got crated and shelved and listed on an inventory sheet as prototype units, non-conforming, no production value. Non-conforming, because they didn't match any catalog. Of course they didn't. They were better than the catalog. Eli ran his light along the nearest block until he found it, low on the casting, where the bell housing flange met the bottom of the engine, a spot no buyer would ever see and no expert would ever think to check. A small mark struck into the metal. You'd miss it unless you knew the exact inch. A bird. A tiny wren, wings folded no bigger than a thumbnail, pressed deep and clean into the iron. His father had carried that stamp before him. The old man had been a tool and die man, not at Drayton, a small shop 2 towns over. He struck a wren into every die he ever cut. The wren, he told his boy, is the plainest little bird God made, and it sings like it was paid to. Nobody notices a wren. The wren doesn't care. It sings anyway. It builds the tightest nest in the woods. It does honest work where nobody's looking. When he died, he left his son 2 things. A steel letter stamp ground into the shape of that bird, and the habit of signing good work where only the work would know. Eli had struck the wren into every engine he ever finished. All 6 of the last run wore it, low and hidden, the same exact inch on every block. A place known to exactly 1 living man. He sat back on his heels in the buzzing dark. He looked at the 6 of them. And for the first time in 14 years, something moved in his chest that wasn't grief. Because Adrian Voss had a report from people with letters after their names. And Eli had 6 wrens nobody else on earth knew how to find. Somewhere out there were collectors who'd empty a bank account for 1 finished engine from the last run, let alone all 6. Let alone all 6 brought home and made right by the only man who could do it. He pulled the stamp out of his coat pocket. The actual steel, worn smooth on the grip from 2 men's hands. He held it in his palm. He felt how light it was, for a thing that had just become the most valuable object he owned. $3 million, he thought. Maybe more. Then he thought about the one thing in the world that mattered more than that. He put the stamp away. He turned off the light. And he drove home to her. The house was small and white and needed paint. The porch light was on. Because the porch light was always on. A girl named Nora had decided, when she was 6, that her mother might still be able to see it. Eli had never once had the heart to argue. Sarah had been gone 3 years that spring. An aneurysm, the doctor said. a blood vessel in the brain that had been waiting her whole life to fail. One ordinary Sunday it did. She was kneeling in the garden with dirt on her hands. By the time the ambulance came there was nothing anyone could do. No warning, no goodbye. Just a kettle she'd put on, still warm when Eli got home. And a row of tomato seedlings he couldn't bring himself to move for a year. The garden was still there. He kept it the best he could, which was badly. But the roses she'd put in came back every June without asking permission. That felt like a kind of mercy. Inside, Edith Okafor from next door was asleep in the armchair with the television low. She woke when the door clicked and waved off his thanks, the way she always did. She fought me on bedtime, she whispered, gathering her things. Drew till her eyes wouldn't stay open. That child. She's stubborn. Gets it from her mother. She gets it from both of you, and you know it. Edith paused at the door. She had a blue spell after supper. Eli. Small one. I sat her down. It passed. But you should tell the doctor. I will. How are the payments? She asked it gently, the way you ask a thing you already half know the shape of. Don't say fine. I raised 4. I know what fine looks like, and you don't wear it. Eli was quiet a moment. I'm working on it. Working on it. Edith studied him. That child has one parent left in this world, and he's at a junkyard half the night. I'm not scolding you. I'm telling you you're not as alone as you've decided you are. She patted his arm, hard, the way the old women in that town showed love. Whatever you're working on, I hope to God it works. So do I, Eli said. Thank you, Edith, for all of it. Hush. Your wife fed half this street. I'm paying it back a casserole at a time. When the door shut, he stood in the quiet a minute. Then he went down the hall to the small room with the night light shaped like a star. And he looked in. Nora slept the way children sleep. All the way. Both arms thrown up over her head like she'd surrendered. She was 9 and small for it. Her dark hair stuck to her forehead. On the wall above her bed, taped in crooked rows, were the birds. She drew birds. Hundreds of them. Crayon birds and marker birds and one careful pencil owl that had taken a whole rainy Saturday. Robins, jays, a flamingo that was mostly a guess. And in the place of honor, right over her pillow, a small brown bird with its wings folded, drawn over and over until she'd gotten it the way she wanted. A wren. He'd shown her the stamp once. A year ago. A bad night, when she couldn't sleep, and neither could he. He'd told her about her grandfather, and the bird that sings like it was paid to, and how Daddy pressed it into his engines so they'd remember whose hands made them. Nora took it more seriously than he expected. Can engines remember things? She'd asked. The good ones can, he'd said. She'd thought about that and decided it was true. She'd been drawing wrens ever since. He pulled the blanket up over her shoulder. He watched her breathe. He counted it, the way he counted it every night. The small catch in it. The half beat that wasn't right. A valve in her heart had never closed the way it should. She'd been born with it. For years it was just a murmur, a thing the doctor listened to and wrote down and watched. But hearts grow. And a heart working harder than it should grows the wrong way. Over the last year, the doctor's voice had changed. The blue spells came more often now. She couldn't run the length of the yard without sitting down. The cardiologist up in Cleveland was a calm woman named Dr. Reyes. At the last appointment, she'd finally said the word out loud. She'd pulled her stool close and spoken to Nora first, the way good doctors do, and then to Eli. The valve's getting tighter, Dr. Reyes said. Her heart's working too hard to push past it. That's what the blue spells are. That's why she has to sit down. So we fix it, Eli said. We fix it. Surgery. A repair. She said it plainly. No flinching, which Eli was grateful for. Not today. But soon. This is the kind of thing we do before it forces our hand, not after. How soon is soon? This year. Before winter. if I had my way. She turned back to Nora and softened. You're going to be running circles around your dad by next summer. You know that? Nora considered her. I already can, she said. He's slow. Doctor, Reyes laughed. Eli tried to, but she'd caught his eye over the top of Nora's head, and the look in it carried the rest. The part you don't say in front of the child. Soon was not a someday word anymore. Soon had a clock inside it. The valve needed repair. This year. And the surgeon who did Nora's kind of repair best was not in their network, and did not take what their insurance offered. Eli had the number written on a sheet, taped to the refrigerator, where he had to look at it every morning. After everything insurance would cover, after the assistance programs, after the payment plans, the family share came to $211,000. $211,000. Eli made $19 an hour at the salvage yard. He'd run the math so many times it had stopped being math. Hollis found him at it again, staring past a cold coffee. How much? Hollis said. $211,000, after what insurance won't touch. And you've got $4,000 in a kitchen drawer. Eli rubbed his face. I sold Sarah's car, sold my father's good tools, kept the one stamp I couldn't make my hand let go of. I load freight Saturdays now. And the hospital, holding a date in the fall, gentle as they can, like a table at a restaurant. He looked up. It's already spring, Hollis. 4,000 isn't ever going to be 211. Hollis didn't say it would be all right. He'd buried a wife too. He just refilled the cold coffee and stayed. He'd been lying awake at night doing arithmetic that had no answer. And then, today, a woman in a gray suit had told him to fish his treasure out of the dumpster. And laughed. And he'd loaded 6 answers onto a flatbed. He went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. It was a thing he did now. An old habit borrowed from a dead woman. While the water heated, he sat at the table and took out the Wren stamp and set it on the wood and looked at it under the bulb. $3 million was a number from another planet. He didn't need $3 million. He needed $211,000, and he needed it before the leaves turned. One engine from the last run, sold right, sold to the right collector with the right papers, would do that and more. 6 of them would do things he couldn't let himself picture yet. But there was a long road between a dead engine on a salvage pallet and a check that cleared. He knew that road. He'd have to finish the 6th engine, the one Walter never got running. He'd have to make all 6 perfect, because collectors paid for perfect and laughed at almost. He'd have to prove they were real. And the only proof that mattered was hidden low on 6 castings, where one living man knew to look. And he'd have to do all of it quietly, in a back bay at Renner Salvage. On nights and weekends, around a job he couldn't quit. Before a date a hospital was holding for his little girl, the floor creaked. Nora stood in the doorway in her nightgown, hair wild, blinking against the light, the way she did when a dream had let her go. She saw the stamp on the table, and her whole face changed. You took the Wren out, she said, like he'd let a secret loose. Couldn't sleep, baby, what are you doing up? I heard the kettle. She climbed into the chair across from him, drew her knees up inside the nightgown, so she was a small tent with a head on top. She looked at the stamp, then at him. She had Sarah's eyes, and Sarah's way of looking at a person until they told the truth. You went to a sad place today, she said. I can tell. Eli almost laughed. How can you tell? Your shoulders. She pointed. They go up, like a turtle. She reached across the table and put one finger on the steel wren, very lightly. The way you'd touch something asleep. What happened? He looked at his daughter. At the catch in her breath he could see, even now, the small rise and fall too quick under the cotton. At the $211,000 standing between her and a healthy life. At the 6 engines across town with his father's bird hidden inside them. I think, Eli said slowly, Daddy found some old friends today. Some engines I made a long time ago, before you were born. I thought they were gone. But they're not gone. They came back. Nora's eyes went wide. The ones with the wren? The ones with the wren. All 6 of them. Are you going to fix them? I'm going to fix them. She thought about this with the full seriousness of a 9-year-old, chin on her knees. And then what happens? Eli reached over and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. And he made her a promise, the way he'd made her mother a promise once. Quiet, meaning every word, and not entirely sure how he'd keep it. And then he said, I'm going to use them to get you fixed. And when you're all better, you and me are going to plant something new in Mama's garden. Whatever you want. Deal? A bird feeder, Nora said immediately. For wrens. For wrens, Eli said. Deal. What color roof? Whatever color you want. Green, she said certain. Wrens like green. Do they? I read it. In the bird book. She considered this. Or I decided it. One of those. He laughed, quiet, so as not to wake the house. She held her small hand out across the table. They shook on it, solemn as 2 men closing a contract. Then she yawned so hard her whole body shook. He carried her back down the hall and laid her under the crooked rows of birds and sat with her until the catch in her breathing slowed and evened into sleep. Then he went back to the kitchen. And he did not go to bed. He took out a notebook, and under the bare bulb, while the town slept, Eli Brandt started to make a plan. The plan, like most real plans, was mostly work. Eli started the next night and every night after. Finish his shift at Renner. Eat a sandwich standing up. Drive home, put Nora to bed. Then drive back to the yard once Edith settled in and work the engines under the light until 2 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep. The alarm. The whole thing again. The first thing he did was clean them. Not fix. Clean, 14 years of warehouse dust and shelf grime came off slow, with degreaser and brushes and a patience he'd forgotten he had. Underneath the grime, the engines came back to him, 1 inch at a time. The hand scraped bearing surfaces. The intake runners he'd polished by feel. The valve covers Walter insisted be finished by hand, because a machine, the old man said, has no pride. 5 of the 6 had run, once. Time and bad storage had seized rings and rotted seals and turned good oil to varnish. But the bones were perfect, and bones were the thing you couldn't fake. Eli freed them the slow way. Soaking, turning, coaxing, the way you'd work life back into a cold hand. The 6th was the problem. The 6th was the one Walter died before finishing. No heads finished, no final timing set. A fuel system the old man had been redrawing on napkins the week his heart stopped. Eli remembered the arguments. He remembered where Walter wanted to go with it, and where Eli thought he was wrong. Now, 14 years later, alone in a salvage bay, he got to find out which of them had been right. And he found himself talking to a dead man while he did. You were chasing the wrong curve, Walter, he muttered one night, elbow deep in the 6th engine. Told you then. Telling you now. He could almost hear the old man answer, the way you can hear the dead, when you've loved them and worked an arm's length from them long enough. Prove it, the voice said. Don't tell me. Show me. That was always your whole problem, Eli said, to nobody, to the iron, to 14 years of missing him. You never once took my word. You never gave me cause to. I'm about to. He reset the curve his way, the way he'd argued for in a cold shop the winter before the old man died. And when he turned the engine over by hand, it came around sweeter than it ever had on Walter's drawings. Eli sat back on his heels. There, he said softly. Told you. The engine didn't argue. For the first time, Walter let him have the last word. He couldn't do it all alone. He knew it. Some of the machining was past what a salvage lift and hand tools could manage. So in the 2nd week, he made a call he'd been putting off. To a number he wasn't even sure still worked. Dale Pruitt answered on the 4th ring. Suspicious, the way old men answer phones. Dale, it's Eli Brandt. A pause. Well, I'll be. You still upright? Mostly, Eli's hand tightened on the phone. Dale, I've got the last run. Silence on the line. So long Eli thought the call had dropped. Say that again, Dale said. All 6. I've got all 6. Somebody was going to crush them. I pulled them off the pallet. Who's somebody? Doesn't matter. I've got them. I'm finishing them. And I can't true the decks on number 6 with a salvage lift and a prayer. Eli closed his eyes. I need the best machinist I ever knew. You still got that in you, old man? Or did you let it go soft watching daytime television? The 6th one. Dale wasn't joking anymore. You really think you can finish what Walter couldn't? I think I'm the only man left alive who can. Yeah, Dale said slowly. Yeah, you might be at that. God help us both. A pause. What time you want me there? Dale Pruitt was at the yard the next morning at 7. His own micrometers in a wooden box. Tears he pretended were from the cold. He put his hands on the first engine and went quiet the same way Eli had. Hello, you beautiful son of a gun, he said low. He went down the line, touching each one. This is number 2. Threw a rod on the dyno once, and Walter cussed for a solid week. He moved on. Number 4. Look at that port work. That's yours, Eli. I'd know it blind. He stopped at the 6th and stood a while. And this one. That's the one he never finished. I know which one it is. Dale's voice had gone rough. I was there the morning they found him in the lot. I carried the drawings out of his office myself, so the bank couldn't put a lien on a dead man's last idea. He looked up. You still have them. I have the drawings. And the arguments. And 40 years of knowing him. Then we can finish it. Then we can finish it. Dale nodded slowly and rolled his sleeves up. And after that there were 2 of them. They worked. God, they worked. 2 old Drayton men in a salvage bay, building the dead back to life. Walter would hate this, Dale said one night, truing the deck on number 6. You doing the heads your way. Walter would watch an hour, then claim he thought of it first. Dale laughed. That's exactly what he'd do. He ran a thumb down the deck. 1/1000th. There, feel it. That's the man I called. Some nights the years fell away, and it was the back of the old shop again, Walter griping one bay over. Bit by bit, the last run came back. They didn't talk much while they worked. They didn't need to. But some nights, late, things came out. You know what he'd say if he walked in right now? Dale said one night, not looking up from the deck he was truing. Walter, he'd say we were doing it wrong. He'd say you were doing it wrong. Dale almost smiled. I was always fine. You set number 3's timing 4 degrees off in 91. That was a Tuesday. Tuesdays don't count. Dale blew the metal dust off and held the surface up to the light. He'd be proud, though, under all the griping. You know that. Eli didn't answer right off. He'd gone still over a valve seat. He never heard the 6th one run, he said. No, drew it for 2 years, right up until the end. And he never heard it. Eli shook his head and went back to work. Dale set his micrometer down. He looked at the younger man across the iron. He'd known Eli since the boy was 19 with a broom in his hands, and he chose his next words carefully, which was not a thing Dale Pruitt was known for. Then you finish it, Dale said. And you start it. And wherever the old man's got to, he hears it. That's how it works. You believe that? I'm 70 years old and I'm truing decks in a junkyard at midnight for free. He picked the micrometer back up. I'll believe whatever I want. Eli laughed. It surprised him, the sound of it. He hadn't laughed in that bay in 14 years. He brought Nora out once, on a Saturday, because she asked, and he'd run out of ways to say no. She walked the bay slow, hands behind her back, the way she'd seen grown-ups do in the one museum they'd ever been to. She stopped in front of the engines and looked at them a long while. They're big, she said. Heavy, too. Can I touch one? Wash your hands first. Dale said it from across the bay before Eli could. Iron knows a dirty hand. Nora looked at the old man. Then she went and washed her hands at the slop sink without being told twice, dried them on her jeans, and came back and laid one small palm flat on the nearest block, solemn as church. "Is the bird in there?" she asked. "The wren?" Eli crouched beside her. "Right here." He guided her fingers low, under the flange, to the hidden inch. "Feel it?" Her whole face changed. Her eyes went wide. "It's the bird," she whispered. "It's really in there. Your grandfather's bird. Mine now." And one day, he hadn't meant to say it, but she was looking up at him. "One day yours. If you want it." "I want it," Nora said. Right away. The way she'd said bird feeder. No hesitation in her at all. Across the bay, Dale had gone quiet. He turned back to his bench and cleared his throat and pretended, for the second time that month, that something had got in his eye. "That's a brant, all right," he said, to nobody in particular. Knew it the second she washed her hands. Hollis found Eli in the bay one night near midnight, long after the man had any reason to still be at the yard. "Light was on," Hollis said from the doorway. "He had 2 coffees. He held one out. Figured it was you or a thief. Thief wouldn't have the radio playing. Eli took the coffee. You're up late. So are you. Every night, near as I can tell." Hollis looked at the engines on the lift, then at the gray under Eli's eyes. "You're going to work yourself into the ground, son, and then what's that little girl got? I'm fine. You're not. But you're stubborn, which looks the same from a distance." Hollis drank his coffee. He didn't leave. "Whatever this is, whatever you're still not telling me, it's going to come for you, isn't it? The lady in the suit." Eli was quiet a moment. "Probably," he said. "Then drink your coffee, and when it comes, you don't stand in front of it by yourself." Hollis clapped him once on the shoulder, hard, and walked back out into the dark. He didn't wait to be thanked. He never did. Word moves in small worlds. The world of people who care about hand-built engines is very small. Eli knew the moment he needed real parts and real answers, the whisper would start. He tried to keep it quiet. He failed. There is no quiet way to ask 3 different specialists for new old stock seals that fit a Drayton prototype. The whisper reached a woman named Priya Sharma about a month in. Priya was 34 and worked for one of the big heritage auction houses, the kind that sold dead men's cars to living men's egos for the price of a neighborhood. She ran their engine and provenance desk, which meant she knew more about old American iron than almost anyone alive. When a rumor crossed her desk that someone in Ohio was quietly sourcing parts for the Drayton last run, she didn't believe it. The last run didn't exist anymore. Everyone knew that. The prototypes were lost in the bankruptcy, written off. Gone, she drove 4 hours to Linden Falls to prove the rumor false. She found a salvage yard, a back bay, 2 men in coveralls. Then she saw what was on the lift. And Priya Sharma, who'd stood in front of $40 million collections without blinking, had to sit down on an overturned bucket. "These are fakes," she said, which is what experts say when they're afraid something is real. "These have to be fakes." The last run was destroyed. The last run, Eli said, was put on a shelf with a wrong label, then on a pallet, then almost crushed. It wasn't destroyed. It was thrown away by people who didn't know what they had. He wiped his hands. "I can prove every one of them is real, but I need to know I can trust you before I show you how." Priya got up off the bucket. She walked the line slow. The way speed in front of these engines felt like a kind of disrespect. She stopped at the 3rd one, crouched, looked at the casting numbers, at the handwork on the ports. Her breath had gone shallow. "This intake was scraped by hand," she said. "Nobody does this. Nobody's done it in 40 years. The labor alone would cost more than." She stopped. "Who scraped it?" "I did. You did. 30 years ago. That one I did on a Sunday. Walter docked me for working unpaid, then kept me on anyway." Eli almost smiled. He was like that. She stood up and looked at him differently. "You worked for Drayton. I was his last master builder. There's no record of a last master builder. The company files were lost, I know. Convenient for anyone who'd rather these be fakes. Eli shrugged. I'm not in a file. I'm in the iron. That's the only place that ever mattered to Walter. It's the only place it matters now. She was quiet a long moment. Then she asked the question that told him she already believed. What do you need from me? Priya said. Priya looked at him a long time. Then she looked at the engines. Something hungry and reverent moved across her face. The look of a person standing in front of the thing they'd given their whole life to. Mr. Brandt, she said, if these are what you say they are, they're the most important find of my career. And I will walk over hot coals to sell them right. But I have to ask you something, and I need you to hear it the right way. She leaned forward. Do you know whose engines these were? On paper? Who owned them when they hit that pallet? Voss Industrial, Eli said. Woman named Adrienne Voss. She gave them to me. Told me to fish them out of the trash. Signed off the scrap weight. The whole thing's on paper at the yard. Priya went very still. Adrienne Voss, she repeated, told you to take the Drayton last run for scrap weight. In front of about 6 people and a photographer. Priya put her face in her hands and laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who can see a cliff edge coming. Mr. Brandt, she said. Do you know what's happening at Voss Industrial right now? No. They're drowning. She stood, pacing now. Adrienne Voss inherited that company from her father 2 years ago. The boards wanted her gone since the day she walked in. She's been selling off everything that isn't nailed down to make the numbers work. You know why she bought the Drayton plant? A heritage play. Investors love a legacy. The story was Voss Industrial revives a legendary American name, relaunches it as a premium line, and there's a buyer. A big one. Been circling the whole company for a year. She turned to face him. And the only reason that buyer cares about Voss at all is the Drayton name, and whatever crown jewels came with it. The bay was quiet except for the buzz of the light. And she crushed the crown jewels, Eli said slowly. She almost crushed them. Then she handed them to a salvage worker. For $61 a ton. She shook her head. Mr. Brandt, the second the world finds out these survived, and that you have them, 2 things happen. First, every serious collector on earth wants them, and the price goes enormous. She paused. Second, Adrienne Voss realizes exactly what she threw away. And people like that do not say oops. They send lawyers. The letter came 11 days later. It came to the yard first. A thick envelope from a law firm in Chicago. More names on the letterhead than a phone book. Addressed to Renner Salvage and to the individual in possession of certain Voss Industrial assets. Hollis opened it at the dock. Read it twice. Then carried it to the back bay without a word and put it in Eli's grease-black hands. Eli read it under the work light, Dale looking over his shoulder. It was written in the cold language money rents by the hour. Eli read it twice at the yard office desk while Hollis watched. What's it say? That the engines are still theirs. That the salvage ticket only covered scrap. That if I try to sell, they bury me in lawyers. Eli turned the page. And here. At the bottom. They put this word in on purpose. He read it out. Unauthorized retention of company property could constitute theft. All rights reserved. Civil and criminal. Criminal, Hollis said. They're calling you a thief. They're reminding me they can. That's the point of the whole letter. It's not a threat you answer, it's one you feel. Criminal. Eli felt the floor tilt a little. They can't do that, Dale said. You've got the ticket. She said it in front of people. Take your treasure. 61 a ton. She said it. They're not trying to win, Dale. Eli set the letter down, careful, the way you set down something that might go off. They're trying to scare me. They know I'm a salvage hand. $19 an hour and a kid. They figure I can't afford a lawyer for 10 minutes, let alone a fight with a firm like this. They figure I'll hand the engines back rather than lose everything. He looked at the paper. And they're not wrong to figure that, because that was the trap. And Eli saw all of it at once. A lawsuit takes time, Eli told Edith on the porch that night. Even a stupid one. Even one I'd win. Months, years, and you don't have years. I've got a date in the fall. A hospital holding it for a girl whose lips go blue when she runs. He pressed his hands flat on the rail. If they tie the engines up in court, I can't sell them. If I can't sell them, there's no 211,000. And if there's no 211,000, he didn't finish it. Then, none of it mattered. Edith said softly, none of it. And her heart keeps growing the wrong way while lawyers in Chicago bill by the quarter hour. And there was more. There was Hollis. 2 days after the letter, a different kind of pressure arrived. A man in a good suit. Not a lawyer. Something smoother. He sat in the yard office uninvited and folded his hands. Voss sends a lot of work to yards like this, he said pleasantly. Demolition. Asset recovery. Steady money for a regional operator. That a fact, Hollis said. It is. And it'd be a shame if a small yard got a name as a place that sits on property that isn't its own. Reputations travel. He smiled the whole time. I'm sure we can all be reasonable. He left a card on the desk. Hollis looked at it a moment, then dropped it in the coffee can with the cigarette butts. Hollis told Eli that night. The old man's hands were shaking. Not with fear, with fury. They want me to lean on you, Hollis said. That's the message. Give the engines back, Eli, or Renner Salvage loses the contracts that keep my 8 guys working. He crushed the card in his fist. 40 years I built this yard. And some kid in a $1,000 suit thinks he can walk in and... Hollis? Eli's voice was quiet. Give them back. What? Give the engines back. To me on paper, formally, sell me the bay outright. Or... let me move them. Get your name off this. Eli meant it. This is my fight, not yours. You gave me a job when my hands wouldn't stop shaking and nobody else in this county would look at me. I'm not going to be the reason your guys go hungry. We move the engines somewhere that isn't yours. Your contract's safe. This stays mine. Hollis looked at him a long moment. Then he threw the crushed card in the dirt and stepped on it. My grandfather drove a Drayton truck till the day he died. Hollis said, wouldn't buy anything else. Said a Drayton was the only honest thing Detroit ever made. Except it wasn't Detroit. It was right here. It was these. People. Your people. He jabbed a finger at the bay. I've spent 30 years selling the chopped up corpses of things. You're the first man who ever brought something into my yard to bring it back to life instead of tear it apart. So no, I'm not giving them back, and I'm not throwing you out to save a contract. Let them pull it. Let them try. His voice cracked. I'd rather go under doing one right thing than stay open doing this. And just like that, Eli wasn't alone, even in the part where it almost went wrong. But almost is the word that lives in the middle of every true story. And this was the almost. Because a week after the letter, Voss Industrial made its smartest move yet. And it had nothing to do with lawyers. Dale slapped a trade magazine down on the bench, open near the back. The kind of thing only a few thousand people read. Exactly the right few thousand. Read it, Dale said. He was already read. Eli read it. An unnamed source cast doubt on the rumor in heritage circles. The surviving Drayton Last Run engines were almost certainly not authentic. The real prototypes died in the bankruptcy. Anything surfacing now was shop mules, parts assemblies, fakes, passed off by an unqualified party for profit. Unqualified party, Dale said. They mean you. I know who they mean. Some coward with a keyboard, after what you can do with your hands, it's not a coward, Dale. It's a strategy. A good one. It was poison. And it was clever. Because it didn't have to be true. It only had to make buyers nervous. A collector about to spend millions does not want a cloud over the title. Doubt alone could drop the value to nothing. Adrian Voss couldn't legally take the engines back, not with that ticket and those witnesses. So instead, she'd make them worthless. If she couldn't have them, no one would pay for them. And a worthless engine couldn't save anybody's daughter. Eli read the item on his phone at the kitchen table at 1 a.m, and for the first time since the pallet, the thing in his chest that wasn't grief went quiet, and the grief came back. He sat in the dark of the little white house. The porch light burned for a woman who couldn't see it. The refrigerator hummed. On its door, the note said $211,000. Down the hall, his daughter slept with a half beat in her chest under a wall of paper birds. And a woman with a watch worth more than his life had decided, from 400 miles away, to make sure he stayed exactly as small as she'd judged him to be. If you've ever watched someone with everything reach down to take the one thing you had left, you already know what that kitchen felt like at 1 a.m. Sit with him a second before this turns. And if you want to see this woman learn what she actually threw away, do me one favor and tell me you're still in that back bay with us. Because the next part is the part Eli built with his own 2 hands. He didn't sleep that night. But somewhere around 3, the grief burned down to something harder, underneath. The way it does. And Eli Brandt stopped feeling small and started to think. Because they were trying to make the engines look fake. And the one thing on earth Eli could do, that no expert and no lawyer and no billionaire could do, was prove they were real. There were 6 wrens hidden in 6 castings, struck by a stamp that had belonged to his father, in a spot known to exactly 1 living man. Let them say the engines were fake. He'd make them prove it, in a room full of people. And he'd be holding the one card nobody else at the table even knew existed. He picked up the notebook again. And the plan stopped being about hiding, and started being about the opposite. The next morning, Eli called Priya and told her everything he'd been holding back. The wren, his father, the stamp in his coat pocket, the hidden boss low on every casting, the exact inch, the mark known to 1 living man. There was a silence on the line. Then Priya spoke, careful, like she didn't want to scare off what she was hearing. Say that again. Slowly, there's a maker's mark, a signature, in a location that isn't documented anywhere. On all 6. Same spot. My father's wren. I struck every one of them myself. Eli, she almost never used his first name. Do you understand what that is? Tell me. A smear says they're fakes. Fine. A forger can copy a casting. A forger can age metal. A forger can fake a build sheet. Her words were speeding up. You know what a forger can't do? Reproduce a private maker's mark, struck by a specific tool, in a hidden spot nobody outside the original shop ever knew existed. That also matches the documented marks on authenticated earlier Drayton engines, and matches the actual physical stamp in your pocket. She breathed out. That's not a story, Eli. That's a fingerprint. That's the one thing on earth their experts can't argue with. How sure are you? I've authenticated engines for 15 years. I've never once seen a thing I couldn't argue both sides of. Until this. A pause. I'm sure. So we don't hide them, Eli said. We don't hide them. We don't do a quiet sale and pray the cloud lifts. We bring them into the open. And we let the truth do the work. In front of the exact people who need to see it. That's where I landed too, Eli said. Last night. He rubbed his eyes. But I'm a salvage hand, Priya. I can't make a room full of important people show up to watch me embarrass a billionaire. No, Priya said. But I can. 2 things fell into place over the next 2 weeks. Eli built both of them carefully, the way he built everything. The first was a lawyer. Because you don't walk into a fight with Voss Industrial holding only a salvage ticket and good intentions. Eli couldn't afford 10 minutes of a real one. He knew it. That was the trap they were counting on. The way out came from next door. Edith Okafor had a son. Theo Okafor had grown up in the house beside Eli's. He'd mowed Sarah's lawn as a teenager, He'd cried at her funeral in the back row. Now he was a property and contracts lawyer up in Cleveland. His mother reminded him of all of this on the phone, in a tone that allowed no argument. He owed this family more than he could ever repay. He'd be helping them now. Theo came down on a Saturday. He read the salvage ticket. He read the cease and desist. He listened to the whole story. And somewhere in the middle of it, he started to smile. They overreached, he said, when Eli finished. Badly, it looked pretty serious to me. It's meant to. That's the job. Theo tapped the letter. But look at what you actually have. A signed salvage agreement, a witnessed verbal transfer, a photographer who was documenting the whole thing for their own investor materials, and a chain of custody cleaner than most estates I handle. He set it down. This letter is a bluff with a tie on. The part about criminal, the criminal theft line, is the tell. Theo shook his head. You don't put that in a real letter. You put that in a scary letter. They're not planning to take you to court, Eli. They know they'd lose. They're trying to make you blink. He looked up. So let's not blink. Let's do the opposite. Let's make them very, very sorry they put any of this in writing. I can't pay you, Eli said. I want to be honest about that up front. I've got $4,000 and a kid's surgery on the other end of it. Theo closed the folder. Mr. Brandt, your wife used to leave a plate for me when my mother worked late. I was 12 and my dad was gone and your house had the lights on. He stood. You're not paying me. Don't bring it up again. And after that, Eli had something he'd never had against the suits before. He had teeth of his own. The second thing was the room. Priya went to work in the small world she ruled. And the small world lit up. A surviving, complete, authenticated Drayton Last Run was not a sale. It was history. The find of a generation. Priya knew exactly the kind of stage it deserved, and exactly who needed to be standing on it. There was a man named Gerald Ashworth. He'd spent 40 years and a great deal of a banking fortune building the finest private collection of American hand-built engines in the world. The Ashworth Collection. He'd wanted a complete Drayton Last Run for 30 years, the way some men want a son. There were journalists. The serious kind. The ones who covered the heritage world, who could turn a quiet authentication into a story 100,000 people would read. There were rival collectors. And there was, Priya made very sure of it, an open invitation to the executives of a private investment group called Kestrel Holdings. Tell me again who Kestrel is, Eli said. Kestrel is the buyer circling Voss, Priya said. The one whose entire interest in that company is the Drayton name and its lost crown jewels. She let that sit. The very people Adrian Voss most needs to impress, and I'm going to invite them to a public unveiling of the engine she tried to crush, and then tried to call fake. Eli was quiet a second. She'll know it's a trap. She'll have to come anyway. That's the beauty of it. Priya's eyes were bright. She can't let an authentication happen in front of Kestrel without her people there to push the fake story in person. If she stays home, the heritage pitch she's been selling collapses on the spot. So she'll come. Or she'll send her sharpest. Either way, she'll be in that room when the truth lands. She spread her hands. We're not ambushing her, Eli. We're holding a door open and letting her walk through it. We invite her to the exact place she has the most to lose. And she comes. Because she thinks she's coming to win. They built it like a case. Night after night, in Priya's rented office with the engine photos pinned to the wall, the three of them laid out exactly how the morning would go. Walk me through it again, Theo said. Voss's people stand up. They say the engines are fakes. Then what? Then I don't argue, Eli said. I agree with them. You agree. I tell the room they're right not to trust me. I'm a scrap hand. I've got every reason to lie. Eli tapped the table, and then I show them the one thing a scrap hand couldn't fake. The wren, Priya said. The wren. All 6, same inch. and I hand their own expert the stamp and let him do the matching. So it's not me saying it, it's their man, in front of their buyer. Theo nodded slowly. That's good. That's very good. Then he frowned. What if he lies? Says there's no mark. He won't, Priya said. Not with 100 witnesses and his whole name in the room. The second he reaches under that flange, he's got two choices. Tell the truth or torch his reputation forever. Men like that protect the name. And the paper? Build sheets with Eli's name. Walter's napkin sketches Dale saved. The photographs. The salvage ticket. Theo's chain of custody. Priya ticked them off. The wren's the stone. The paper's the setting. By itself, the paper's arguable. With the wren in the middle of it, it's a wall. Theo sat back. She walks into a room thinking she controls it, he said. And every single thing she does to win makes it worse. She challenges the engines, she forces the proof. She stays quiet, the sale goes through in front of Kestrel anyway. There's no move, Eli said. There's no move. Theo almost smiled. I've built 100 cases, Mr. Brandt, never one where the other side does all the work for me. Then let's not get cocky, Priya said. She's smart. Smart and cornered is the most dangerous thing there is. She looked at Eli. All you have to do is stay calm and let the truth out slow. Can you do that? Eli thought about a dumpster, about a laugh going around a circle of suits, about a number on a sheet taped to his refrigerator. I've been waiting 14 years to stay calm, he said. I'll manage one more morning. Eli thought about that, about the woman with the watch and the small smile who'd told him to fish his life out of the dumpster, who'd then tried to take it back when she learned what it was worth, and when she couldn't, tried to poison it so no one else could have it either. He wasn't a cruel man. The plan didn't make him feel triumphant. It made him feel something quieter, steadier, the feeling of a thing being set right after 14 years of being wrong. Set it up, he said. But there's one condition. Name it. The engines have to be running. All 6. I'm not unveiling 6 dead engines and a story. I'm starting them. His jaw set. I want every person in that room to hear what she threw away. Priya hesitated. Eli, you don't need them running to authenticate them. The mark does that. Why risk? Because they called them dead. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. That's the whole lie. Dead, non-functional, worth their weight in scrap. The report said it. The smear said it. She said it, to my face, on that floor. He looked at her. I'm going to make them eat the word. All 6 start. Or I don't do it. Which meant the 6th engine had to run. The one Walter Drayton died before finishing. The one with no answer in any book. The one Eli had been arguing about with a ghost for 2 months, at 2 a.m. in a salvage bay. He had 2 weeks. He spent the first one proving Walter wrong. Gently, the way you correct a teacher you loved. The old man had been chasing a fuel curve that fought the engine instead of feeding it. Too aggressive. Too proud. The same argument they'd had in the back of the shop 14 years before. Eli pulled it back. He reworked the heads the way he'd always believed they should be done. He opened the breathing where Walter had choked it. He set the timing by feel, by the small sounds an engine makes when it's close. He failed the first time. Nothing but a dead click and the smell of fuel. Talk to me, he muttered. He adjusted. He tried again. The second time it turned and didn't catch. The third time it caught and died, and he stood there in the quiet with his heart going. Dale, he said. Come look at this with me. The two of them went over it again, inch by inch. Dale found a vacuum line gone hard with age, and they replaced it. Eli leaned on a hunch about the timing that Walter would have hated, and he made the change anyway. The fourth time, it coughed, and caught, and held. 3 seconds. Then he killed it himself, hand shaking. Because 3 seconds was the first breath this engine had taken in its entire life. Dale let out a breath he'd been holding for a decade. "That's it," he said softly. "That's the one. You found it." "Walter found it," Eli said. "I just stopped arguing with him." He brought Nora to the yard that Saturday. She wasn't supposed to get worked up, so he sat her on a stool well back. A blanket, a thermos of cocoa. Dale fussed over her like a grandfather, which he was not, but close enough. "You're about to hear something almost nobody alive has ever heard," Eli told her. "What is it?" 6 old friends, he said, saying hello. Then he and Dale started them, one at a time. The 5 that had always run and now ran like new. The bay filled with a sound that wasn't noise. It was deep and even and clean. 6 decades of knowing how. Nora's eyes got huge over the rim of the cocoa. "They sound happy," she said. "Yeah," Eli said. He had to look away a second. "They do." Then he went to the 6th. He'd gotten it close all week. Now, with his daughter watching, he wanted it perfect. And wanting it that badly is usually how you ruin it. But not this time. He set the choke. He said something to Walter under his breath that nobody heard. He hit the starter. It turned. It caught. And then it didn't die. It dropped into an idle so smooth and so low that for a second Eli thought it had stalled. Except the exhaust still pulsed warm against his hand. Except the whole engine sat there breathing. Alive, steady as a sleeping animal. 14 years. The old man's last design. The thing he'd chased his whole life and died reaching for. Running on a salvage lift in a back bay. Like it had been waiting all this time for the right pair of hands to finish what they'd started together. Dale Pruitt sat down on a bucket and cried without bothering to hide it. Eli reached into his pocket and took out a nickel. He stood it on its edge on the valve cover of the running engine, the way Walter always swore the last run would let you. And he stepped back. The nickel stood. It stood on the head of a living engine, and it did not fall. Nora clapped her small hands and laughed, and the sound of her laughing over the sound of those 6 engines breathing was the best thing Eli Brandt had heard in 3 years. Maybe longer. Maybe since a Sunday with a warm kettle and dirt on a pair of hands he still missed every single day. Grandpa's bird made them remember, Nora said. Certain of it. Eli decided she was right. He didn't trust himself to say so out loud. So now they were alive. All 6. The proof was ready. A few days out, Priya laid it all on the bench in the back bay one last time. The way you check an engine before a first start. "Walk it with me," she said. "What do we have?" "Build sheets," Eli said. "Original. My name's on every one of them." "Good. What else?" "Walter's sketches. The fuel system drawings." Dale lifted a battered coffee can off the shelf and set it down like a relic. Kept these 14 years. Knew they'd matter to somebody someday. "They'll matter to an auction house and a courtroom both," Priya said. "Photographs?" "Of the engines leaving the Drayton floor. 20 years back. Same casting numbers, plain as day." Eli tapped the folder. The salvage ticket. Witnessed. Theo's chain of custody. Clean as a whistle. And the center of it. Priya looked at him. Eli took the stamp out of his pocket and set it on the steel bench. The worn little bird caught the light. "The wren," he said. "The one thing on earth nobody can fake. Because nobody knows it's there but me." Struck by a tool 2 men's hands wore smooth. Priya looked at it a long moment. "A forger can copy a casting," she said, almost to herself. "Age the metal. Fake a sheet. Not that." She straightened. "It's a setting around a stone. The paper's the setting. The bird's the stone. And tomorrow we let the whole world look at the stone." The event was set for a Thursday. A restored hall the auction house used for its biggest unveilings. 2 hours north. Gerald Ashworth confirmed. The journalists confirmed. The rival collectors confirmed. And Kestrel Holdings, the buyer circling Voss, confirmed they'd send their senior people. Of course they had. A public reckoning over the Drayton crown jewels was the one thing they couldn't afford to miss. The only person who hadn't formally answered was Adrienne Voss, But Priya wasn't worried. "She'll be there," she said on the phone the night before. Eli could hear the certainty in it. Or she'll wish to God she had been. Either way, by tomorrow night. Every person whose opinion she spent 2 years trying to buy is going to know exactly what she did. Eli didn't sleep much that night either. He lay awake in the little white house and ran it all one more time. Every piece. The way he checked an engine before a first start, listening for the thing that wasn't right. There was so much that could still go wrong. A hostile expert could stall things. Voss's lawyers could find one more clever thing to say. The buyer could get nervous and walk. And under all of it, always, was the date in the fall and the half beat in his daughter's chest. The thing that turned this from a story about pride into a story about time he didn't have. But somewhere in the dark, he stopped checking. Because he knew the engines were true. He knew the wren was there. He knew the only thing left to do was walk into the room and let the truth out and stand there while it landed. The night before, Nora wouldn't settle. She came padding out in her nightgown while he was laying the blue shirt over the back of the chair. "Is tomorrow the big day?" she said, with the engines. "It's the big day." She climbed up onto the end of his bed and folded herself small. "Are you scared?" He thought about lying. He didn't. "A little," he said. "Why?" "You made them. You said the bird's in there." "The bird's in there." He sat down beside her. "But there's going to be a lot of important people in that room, baby, and some of them are going to want me to be wrong." Nora frowned at that, like it was a foolish thing for grown people to want. "Then show them the bird," she said. "Simple as that, like you showed me. They'll feel it. You can't argue with the bird." Eli looked at his daughter a long moment, and something in his chest that had been pulled tight for weeks let go. Just a little. "No," he said. "I don't suppose you can." He carried her back and tucked her in under the crooked rows of birds. "Go to sleep now. I need you brave tomorrow." "I'm always brave," she said, already half gone. "You're the slow one." He got up before the sun. He put on his one good shirt, which had been Sarah's favorite. Soft blue. Worn thin at the collar. He looked in on Nora, asleep under her birds, and kissed her forehead. "Today's the day, baby," he told her sleeping face. "Today's the day." Then he loaded 6 living engines onto a clean trailer in the gray morning light, and he drove north. Toward a room full of people who thought they already knew how this story ended. The hall had been a railroad terminal once, iron and tall arched windows. Somebody with money had restored it. Now it was the kind of place where important things were sold to important people. By 10 that morning it was full. Collectors in soft jackets, journalists with cameras, recorders held up like little black birds, a long table where Priya's auction house had laid the documents out under glass. And at the center of the floor, on 6 low stands under clean white cloths, sat the last run. Eli stood near them in his thin blue shirt. He did not feel small. That was the thing he noticed. 2 months ago he'd stood in the cold of that gutted plant. She'd told him to climb into a dumpster. He'd felt like a stain on her clean morning. Now he walked into a room full of people with more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes, and his hands were steady. Because he knew something they didn't. He knew what was under the cloths. He knew it down to the last hidden inch. And a man who knows the truth, in a room full of people who only think they do, is never the smallest man there. They'd come early, the 4 of them, and waited in a side room off the main hall while the chairs filled. Dale kept checking his watch. Hollis kept not sitting down. "How many?" Dale said. 110 confirmed, Priya said. More walking in. And the Kestrel people? Front row, left, 3 of them. The tall one's their authentication man. He any good? Best in the country. That's the point. Wonderful, Hollis muttered. We brought the best in the country to call our boy a liar. He won't be calling anybody a liar by lunch. Eli stood by the window, not saying anything. Dale came and stood next to him. You all right, son? I keep thinking about Walter. He'd have hated this. The suits, The cameras. He'd have hated the suits. He'd have loved the rest. Dale's hand landed on his shoulder. His engines in a hall like this, 100 people about to find out what they are? He'd have stood in the back and griped about the lighting and cried where nobody could see him. Dale's voice went rough. Same as I'm about to. A knock at the door. Priya stood. They're seated. It's time. She looked at Eli. You don't say a word until you're ready, and when you're ready, you say all of it. I'm ready, Eli said. He wasn't, quite, but he would be the second he walked through the door. That was the strange thing he'd learned about himself that spring. Gerald Ashworth found him first. An old man, white hair, a young man's eyes. He took Eli's grease-scarred hand in both of his and held it. 40 years I've waited, Ashworth said. His voice was quiet. I'd given up. Whatever happens today, son, thank you for not letting them die. Eli didn't trust himself to answer. He nodded. The old man squeezed his hand and let go. Then the doors opened, and Adrienne Voss came in. She came the way she'd come across the salvage floor, unhurried, the room moving around her, 2 lawyers at her shoulder, the smooth man with the card half a step behind. Charcoal today. The watch. The same expression. Mild, certain, the face of someone arriving at a meeting she means to control. She scanned the room. Her gaze passed over Eli once. Snagged. Came back. He watched her place him. The scrap hand. The feeling. He watched her decide, one more time, that he was nothing to worry about. That was her mistake. She made it twice. Priya welcomed the room and laid out the claim. Plainly 6 engines, she said. Believed lost in the Drayton bankruptcy 14 years ago. Recovered, restored, presented today for full authentication in front of this gathering. The provenance was complete. It would be made available to anyone who asked. And then she did the thing Eli had insisted on. She invited challenge. Any expert in the room, she said, was welcome to inspect, to question, to doubt. They wanted no shadow over these engines. They wanted the truth. In the open, today, Voss's lawyer took the invitation before she finished offering it. He was good. He stood, smooth and grave, and he did not raise his voice, and he was poison. He represented Voss Industrial, he said, the lawful former owner of these units. The company had grave concerns. These so-called prototypes had no verified production history. The man presenting them was, with respect, a salvage laborer. No credentials. No engineering record. No standing in this field whatsoever. The documents could be assembled by anyone. The engines could be parts assemblies. Shop mules. Clever fabrications dressed up in a romantic story. Before anyone in this distinguished room spent real money, he said, they deserved to know. They might be looking at an elaborate fake, built by a man with every reason to lie. It was the smear, said out loud, in the room, to the buyers, and it worked the way poison works. Eli watched it move through the crowd. He watched a journalist write something down. He watched 2 collectors lean together and murmur. He watched the Kestrel men exchange a careful look. And he understood something with a cold drop in his stomach. Doubt didn't need to win the argument. It only needed to exist. A cloud over the title, Priya had called it. The lawyer had just rolled one in over the whole room. Voss did not gloat. She didn't need to. She looked at Eli across the floor with something almost like kindness. The patient look of an adult watching a child's sandcastle meet the tide. She tilted her head at him. The same small smile. He could read it from 30 feet. You should have stayed in your dumpster, it said. Priya stepped forward to answer, papers in hand, ready for the long fight. Document by document. And Eli knew that fight could run for hours. He knew it might not land. You cannot kill a cloud with paper. The buyers were already nervous, and somewhere up north a hospital was holding a date he could feel ticking in his own chest. So Eli Brandt did the thing nobody in the room expected. He stepped past Priya. into the open floor, into the center of all those important eyes, a salvage hand in a dead woman's blue shirt. He held up one hand, and he spoke, in a voice that wasn't loud and didn't need to be. "You're right." The room went quiet. "You're right," he said again. To the lawyer, to Voss, to all of them. "I'm not an engineer with letters after my name. I don't have standing in your field. I scrap metal for $19 an hour. Nobody moved. 2 months ago, this woman told me to fish these out of a dumpster. She was so sure I was nobody that she signed them over to me for $61 a ton." He let that sit. "So don't take my word for anything." "I wouldn't. You shouldn't." He turned slowly, took in the whole room. "But you don't have to take my word. Because the man who built these engines left a signature on every one of them, in a place he never told anybody about, in a place no forger could copy, because no forger ever knew it was there." His eyes found Voss. "Held, and I can show you. Right now. On all 6. The same exact spot. Struck by the same exact tool." He reached into his pocket and took out the wren. It didn't look like much. It never had. A short bar of steel, dark with age, worn smooth at the grip, where 2 men's hands had held it across 60 years. At the working end, ground into the metal, the shape of a small bird with its wings folded. He held it up so the light caught it. From 30 feet, it was nothing. A scrap of iron in a scrap man's hand. "This was my father's," Eli said. "He was a tool and die man. He struck a wren into every die he ever cut. Because he said the wren is the plainest bird God made, and it sings anyway, and it does honest work where nobody looks." He turned the stamp slowly between his fingers. "He left it to me when he died. And I struck this same bird into every engine I ever built. Low on the casting, down on the bell housing flange where the metal turns under, in a spot no buyer ever sees and no expert ever thinks to check." He looked at the lawyer, "Including yours." The lawyer's mouth opened. "This is theater," he managed. "There's no. Then it costs you nothing to look," Eli said, not turning around. "Sit down." Somewhere in the seats a collector said it, low, to no one in particular. "Let the man talk." Another voice agreed. And the lawyer found the room had turned against the interruption and not against the salvage hand, and he closed his mouth and sat back down. "You've had your people on these engines for 6 weeks," Eli said, "reading the welds, measuring the tolerances, building a report that says a man like me couldn't have made them." He nodded, like it was fair. "I'm sure it's a good report. But your people were looking where experts look. They never got down on the floor and ran a thumb under the flange." He paused. "Why would they? Nobody signs his name where nobody can see it. Another beat. Unless his father taught him to." He crossed to the first engine. The room came with him. 100 important faces turning like a field of grass and wind. "Don't take my word," he said again. "Take a look." He found the man he wanted, without being told who he was. The one standing apart. Expensive coat. The still face of someone whose opinion got paid for. The authentication expert the buyers had brought to keep themselves safe. The man from Kestrel's side. "You," Eli said. "You're here to tell these people what's real. Come tell them." For a moment the man didn't move. Then he did. Because everyone was watching now. A man who refused to look would be saying something he didn't want to say. Eli crouched at the base of the first block, put one greased dark finger low, under the curve of the flange. The exact inch. "Here," he said. "Run your thumb across it." The expert crouched, reached under. His face changed. A small change. The kind a careful man can't quite stop. The eyebrows up a 1/4 inch, the mouth going still in a new way. "There's a mark," the expert said. "What is it?" A pause. The man's thumb moved back and forth, reading it the way a blind man reads a page. "It's a bird," he said. "A small bird. Wings folded. Say it so they can hear you." The expert stood. He looked at the room, then at Voss, then at the engine again. And when he spoke, his voice had the flat care of a man choosing each word in front of witnesses. "There is a maker's mark struck into the lower flange," he said. "Concealed. A-Ren. It is not visible from any normal angle. I did not know it was there." "Now the next one," Eli said. They went down the line. At the second engine, the expert crouched, reached, and went still. "Here," he said. "Same mark. Same place." A murmur moved through the room. At the third, a collector in the second row was already on his feet. "Show us," he called. "Where exactly?" The expert showed him. The man bent low and looked, and straightened slowly, and said nothing at all, which from a man like that said everything. "Keep going," somebody said, quietly, like they were afraid of breaking it. The expert crouched and reached and read, engine to engine. At each one he said the same words. Bird, wren, here, the same spot, the same inch. The same small thing pressed deep and clean into the iron, and with every one of them the room got quieter. The quiet changed its shape, because a smear is a kind of noise. And what was filling the hall now was the opposite of noise. 6 engines. 6 wrens. The same hidden bird in the same hidden place, struck by the same tool. And the tool was sitting in Eli Brandt's open hand for anyone who cared to match it. "You can press it into a bar of lead," Eli said to the expert. He held the stamp out. "Compare the strike, the wear pattern, the broken edge on the left wing, where my father dropped it on a concrete floor in 1971. It'll match every one of these." He didn't stop. "It'll match the build sheets in that folder with my name on them. It'll match the photographs of engines that left the Drayton floor 20 years ago." He set the stamp on the nearest block, gently, the way you set down something that's carried you a long way. "Because I made them. All 6. Nobody breathed. I was the last master builder Walter Drayton had. These are the last engines he designed. I finished the 6th one with my own hands after he died, and I struck my father's bird into the bottom of it, so it would remember whose hands made it." The lawyer had stopped being a lawyer. He was just a man holding paper. Eli straightened. His knees popped. He was aware, distantly, of being a tired man in a dead woman's blue shirt in a room full of money, and he was aware that he was not small anymore. Not because he'd gotten bigger, because the room had finally seen what size he'd always been. He let himself look at her then. "Adrian Voss, you called these garbage," he said. The words went out into the silence and did not come back. "Non-conforming, no production value. You were going to crush them for the steel." He let it hang. "They're the find of a generation. Every collector in this room knows it now. You had the rarest American engines ever built sitting in your yard. You looked at them and you saw scrap. Because you're the kind of person who can stand in front of the best work a man ever did and see nothing, as long as the man holding the wrench has dirt on his hands." A muscle moved in her jaw. When she spoke, her voice was still level, still the voice that ran a company. "This is a very moving story," she said. "It changes nothing about the chain of title. It changes everything about it," Theo said. On his feet now, mild as milk. "But by all means, let's discuss title. In front of all these witnesses. You signed them over. At scrap weight. On a witness ticket in this man's hand. Shall I read it out?" She didn't answer. That was the answer. "You called me nobody," he said. "A scrap hand. $19 an hour. You were so sure I was nothing that you signed $3 million over to me for the price of the metal. Just to watch me crawl in a dumpster." His voice stayed low. It didn't need to climb. "Security," Voss said, quietly to her people, to the room. Nobody moved. The word just hung there in the marble, small and useless, because there was nothing in that hall to remove except the truth. And you cannot have the truth escorted out. "Nobody's coming," Eli said. He didn't even look angry about it. It's just you and me and what you did. In front of everybody. With the lights on. I'm the man who built the things you threw away. I've been him the whole time. You just couldn't see it. Because seeing it would have cost you the story you tell yourself about who matters. He picked the stamp back up, closed his hand around it. And you told me to trust your experts, not my own feeling. He almost smiled. He didn't. Well, my feeling standing in this room, it's wearing a coat you paid for. And it just told everyone here I was right. He let the room hold that. Turns out the only real expertise in the building was the kind you can't buy a report for. The kind you get from 40 years of hands-on iron. The kind that knows where the bird is. Then he did the last thing. The thing he'd been saving. You called them dead, Eli said. Let me introduce you. He walked to the 6th engine. The one he'd finished. The one Walter never got to hear run. He'd had Dale and Hollis rig a stand at the back of the hall that morning. A fuel line. A starter. Quietly, while the chairs were still being set. Now he flipped the toggle and pressed the button. The starter spun. And the engine a Billionaire had labeled non-conforming, no production value, scrap weight, caught on the second turn and came alive. It didn't roar. Walter's engines never roared. It settled. It found its idol and held it. Low and even and impossibly smooth. A sound like a big animal breathing in its sleep. The whole room felt it come up through the floor and into their shoes. Eli took a nickel out of his pocket. He'd carried it for this. He set it on its edge, on the top of the running block. Balanced it. Took his hand away. The nickel stood. On its head. On an idling engine. It did not fall. Somewhere in the back, a man Eli didn't know said it very softly. My God. And it carried. Because nothing else in the room dared make a sound. Gerald Ashworth was on his feet. The old collector had a hand pressed flat to his own chest, and he wasn't bidding now, and he wasn't calculating. 40 years, he said, barely aloud, to no one. 40 years, and there it is. A woman near the front said, is the coin, and couldn't finish it. It's standing, somebody answered her. On an idol, the coin standing. Eli let it run. 10 seconds. 20, the nickel standing there like a small silver miracle. The engine breathing under it. 6 wrens hidden in 6 blocks. 100 witnesses. And one woman at the center of it whose whole face had come undone. Because he was watching her when it happened. He hadn't meant to keep watching. But he did. So he saw the moment the armor stopped working. Adrienne Voss looked at the engine she'd called dead. Idling so true, a coin could sleep on it. And for 1 second, she wasn't a CEO. She wasn't his enemy. She wasn't the largest thing in the room. She was a person who had just understood, completely and far too late, exactly what she'd thrown into a dumpster. Her eyes were bright. Her mouth had gone soft and wrong. She looked, for that 1 second, like someone standing at a grave. Then she got the mask back. But everyone had seen. Eli reached down and shut the engine off. The idol fell away. The silence rushed back in. A different silence now. The silence after a verdict. The nickel was still standing on the block where he'd left it. Nobody moved to touch it. That's a Drayton, Eli said. Into the quiet. That's the last run. There are 5 more. They all do that. They're all real, and they were all mine before they were anybody's. He picked up the nickel, put it back in his pocket. Now they belong to whoever loves them enough to take care of them. I just wanted them brought home first. After that, the room did not so much break up as tip over. The buyers came off their chairs all at once. Men who'd spent the last hour keeping their faces neutral were suddenly not neutral at all. They came toward the engines with the particular hunger of people who collect rare things and have just watched one come back from the dead. Priya was in the middle of it instantly, calm in the current, one hand up. There's a process, she said, to everyone, to no one. There will be a process. Everyone gets their chance. What's the reserve? Someone called. Are you selling them as a set? Or singly, I'll beat any opening number in this room. Right now. There's a process, Priya said again, louder, and somehow made it hold. Eli stepped back out of it. He'd done his part. He'd brought them home. The selling was hers. Dale found him at the edge of the crowd. The old man's eyes were red, and he wasn't pretending about the cold this time. You hear it, Dale said, when it caught. You hear how it settled. I heard it. 14 years I thought I'd never hear one of those run again. Dale worked his jaw. And you stood up in a room full of millionaires. And you. He couldn't finish. He gripped Eli's arm hard. He heard it, Dale, Eli said quietly, wherever he got to. You told me that yourself. I'm holding you to it. Hollis came up on the other side, looking around the marble hall like a man who'd wandered into the wrong church. I sell smashed-up alternators for a living, he said, and I just watched the best thing I ever had any part of. He shook his head slowly. 30 years in that yard. This is the one I'm telling them about. You told a man in a good suit to pull his own contracts, Eli said. I did, didn't I? Hollis almost smiled. Worth every penny it nearly cost me. But one man didn't rush. He waited at the edge. The old man in the gray suit. White hair combed straight back. The steady eyes of someone who'd wanted one specific thing his whole life and learned how to wait for it. He let the others crowd and bid and clamor. And when there was finally a gap, he walked over to Eli again. 40 years, Ashworth said. 40 years I've wanted to hear one of these run. And there it was, this morning, in front of me. His eyes went to the 6 blocks. Came back. 6 of them. Whole, real, with papers. He shook his head slowly. Son, I'll write a check today. Whatever the number is. For all of them. And there it was. The thing Eli had been driving toward through every cold night in the yard. A man with a checkbook the size of a house, ready to make every problem in his life disappear with one signature. Eli was quiet for a second. 5, he said. Ashworth blinked. 5? I'll sell you 5. Eli looked down the line, to the 6th engine, the one still warm, the one with the nickel print still ghosted on top. The last one's not for sale. I finished that one after Walter died. He never heard it run. It's the only thing he made that nobody got to hear. And I'm the one who got it breathing. I'm keeping it. He met the old man's eyes. I think you understand that better than most people would. Ashworth looked at him a long moment. Something in the old face eased. What came up underneath it was respect. The real kind. The kind that costs the giver something. I do, he said. God help me, I do. He glanced at the 6th engine the way a man looks at a horse he wants and knows he can't have. Then he let it go. 5 then, and I'll tell you. The 5 will cost me what the 6 would have. Because I'm not a man who haggles over the last great engines on earth. He said a number. The number was $3 million. Eli didn't react the way the room would have. He didn't gasp. He didn't grin. He just felt something very large and very long set itself down at last. The way a freight car settles onto its couplings. And far up north, a hospital let go of a date it had been holding gently for half a year. All right, Eli said. His voice wasn't quite steady. All right. Thank you. They shook on it in front of 100 witnesses. Priya papered it that week, and after her commission, and the auction house's cut, and the taxes that came for their share, the money that landed in an account with Eli Brandt's name on it was a little over $2 million. More money than every man in his family had earned put together across 100 years. The first thing he did with it was make a phone call. He called Cleveland. He called Dr. Reyes's office. He sat on hold with his heart going. And when the scheduler came on, he said the words he'd been rehearsing since spring, without letting himself believe he'd ever say them. This is Eli Brandt. Nora Brandt's father. I'm calling about the surgery. A pause. The cost isn't a problem anymore. I can cover all of it. 211,000. Whatever it is. Today, his voice cracked on the last of it. Can we move the date up? They moved the date up. He told Nora that night, at the kitchen table, the way he told her everything now. Straight. Remember the operation the doctor talked about? For your heart. Nora went still. The scary one. It's not going to be scary. And it's not someday anymore. It's soon. Before the leaves come down. He took her hand. The engines did it, baby, the old friends. They paid for it. All of it. She thought about that with the full seriousness of a 9-year-old. So, I'm getting fixed. You're getting fixed. And then we plant the bird feeder. In Mama's garden. You promised. I remember the deal. And the wren comes. And the wren comes. He squeezed her hand. That was always the deal. She nodded, satisfied, like a contract had been honored. Then, was the lady in the suit there, when you showed them the bird? She was there. Was she nice, at the end? Eli thought about a face coming undone over a running engine. No, he said. But she went quiet. That's something. The other thing. The thing about Adrian Voss. Eli learned that the way the rest of the country learned it. In pieces. Over the following weeks. Because he was no longer in any room where it got decided. Priya called him the morning the first story broke. You sitting down, she said. I'm under a truck. What happened? Kestrel walked. This morning. 2 sentences about no longer seeing strategic alignment. And they're gone. She was trying to keep her voice level and not quite managing it. Eli, do you understand what that is? Kestrel was only ever buying Voss for one thing. The Drayton name. The crown. And the whole world just watched the woman running that company admit, on the record, she tried to crush the crown into scrap and sell it by the ton. So they ran. They ran. The stock's down 19% and it isn't even noon. A breath. You did that. You stood in one room and told the truth, and $1 billion deal walked straight out the door. I didn't do it to wreck her. I know. That's exactly why it worked. A pause. The board meets this week. Nobody I talk to thinks she survives it. She called again 3 days later. Didn't bother with hello that time either. She's out, Priya said. Effective immediately. They'd wanted her gone a year. You handed them the reason. A silence on the line. It's done, Eli. Priya mailed him the trade journal a week later. The same one that had helped run the smear. They'd printed a much longer story now, with photographs of the 6 blocks and the hidden wren blown up large across 2 full pages. Read me the headline, Eli said on the phone, because he was under a truck again and his hands were black. You're going to want to frame this one. She read it slowly. The executive who almost destroyed America's greatest engines. Eli was quiet a moment. That's not a headline I take any pleasure in, he said. I know you don't. That's the whole difference between you and her. A pause. By the end of the month, she was a former CEO. It's done, Eli. All the way done. Eli did not celebrate any of it. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he couldn't. He'd wanted her stopped. She was stopped. There was a grim justice in it he didn't apologize for. But there was no joy in it for him. Because he understood by then what the rest of them didn't. He understood it fully one gray afternoon a month later. He saw a single photograph, a business article, left open on a library computer. It showed Adrian Voss leaving the Voss Industrial Building for the last time, a cardboard box in her arms. And in the box, on top set carefully so it wouldn't be crushed, was a framed photograph of an old man. Her father. Conrad Voss. The man who'd built the company and never once believed his daughter could run it. The man whose approval she'd spent her whole hard life chasing and never caught. The man who was dead now and could never give it. She'd spent that chase trying to prove she was ruthless. Because ruthless was the only language her father ever respected. And in trying to prove it, she'd reached for the most precious things in her father's whole industry, and thrown them in a dumpster. And the throwing had cost her everything. Eli looked at that photograph a long time. The box. The old man's face. A woman who'd hurt him badly, carrying the one thing she had left, careful with it, out a door she'd never walk back through. He didn't forgive her. It wasn't his to forgive. The people she'd stepped on were a longer list than him. But standing there in the quiet of the library, he felt the thing he hadn't expected to feel. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was a kind of sorrow. For how small a life can get when a person spends it trying to be hard enough for someone who was never going to love them back. He closed the article. He went home to his daughter. The rest of it he handled the way he handled everything. One careful thing at a time. He paid off the house. The little house with the porch light and the roses. So no bank could ever again take the last place Sarah had stood. He put a piece of the money into a trust with Nora's name on it and Theo Okafor's clean signature on the paperwork. Locked, Theo said, sliding the last page over. College. After college. Anything she needs. She can't touch the principal till she's 25, and nobody else can touch it ever. Not me either, not you either. That's the point. Theo capped his pen. Whatever happens to you, she lands soft. She never folds a hand the way you had to. Eli looked at the page with his daughter's name on it a long moment. My father left me a stamp, he said. I'm leaving her a floor to stand on. You're leaving her both, Theo said. I saw her face when she touched that bird. The stamp's hers too, and she already knows it. He gathered the folder, signed by the tabs. Eli signed by the tabs. He sent Dale Pruitt, who had asked for nothing, a check large enough to make the old man's hands shake. Dale called an hour after it landed, furious and grateful in the same breath. What is this? Dale said. No hello. It's your share. My share of what? I turned some decks. For a friend. You came at 7 a.m. for 6 weeks. For free. At 70 years old. Eli leaned on the counter. Cash the check, Dale. I don't want your money. It's not mine. It's Walter's. He'd have split it with you and you know it. A silence on the line. Eli pushed into it. You're the last man alive besides me who can true a Drayton deck by hand. Let that be worth something. A long breath came down the wire. Then, gruff and wet at the edges, he would have split it. Damn him, he would have. A pause. I'm buying a new lathe. Buy 2, Eli said. He paid Hollis Renner back for 3 years of a job handed to a stranger who needed one. Hollis tried to give it straight back. I'm not taking this, Hollis said, sliding the envelope across the yard office desk. You gave me work when my hands shook and never asked why. You rented me a bay to chase what looked like a crazy man's dream. You stood in front of a man in a good suit and told him to pull his own contracts. Eli slid it back. Take it, Hollis. I didn't do any of that for money. I know. That's exactly why you're getting it. Eli stood. He didn't pick the envelope back up. He left it on the desk between them and walked out to his truck and drove home. Hollis hollered something after him through the office door. Eli pretended not to hear it. Some debts a man isn't allowed to refuse. And then, when the bills were paid and his daughter was safe and the money had done its quiet work, Eli Brandt did the last thing the money was for. He leased an empty building on the edge of Linden Falls. A real shop this time. A real lift. Good light. His own name over the door. He put up a hand-painted sign that said Brandt Engine Works. And under it, small, where you had to come close to see it, he painted a wren. Dale came by the first morning it opened, his wooden box of micrometers under his arm, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're going to need a man who can true a deck, Dale said. I hear the owner's slow. The owner can't pay much. The owner can pay me and not sitting home watching the television. Dale set the box on the new bench. Where do you want me? Nora had come along, because it was a Saturday. She walked the empty shop with her hands behind her back, inspecting it, and stopped under the sign, and looked up at the small painted bird and then at her father. It's the wren, she said. It's the wren. So everybody knows whose it is. So everybody knows whose it is. Eli crouched beside her. Yours too, one day. If you still want it. I still want it, Nora said. She had never once wavered on that. Then she found a stool and dragged it to the bench and climbed up next to Dale to watch him work. The way Eli had once climbed up to watch Walter. The way the trade had always been handed down. From a pair of hands to a smaller pair that was paying attention. The surgery was in September. It took 6 hours. Eli spent every one of them in a waiting room in Cleveland, a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hands. Edith Okafor beside him, because she'd insisted on driving up and would not be argued with. When Dr. Reyes finally came out, still in her cap, Eli stood up so fast the cold coffee went over the floor. "She's in recovery," Dr. Reyes said. "It went well. It went exactly the way we wanted it to. The valve, fixed. Her heart's already working easier. I could see it the second we finished. She let it land, because she'd watched this man carry it a whole year, and she wanted him to feel it set down. She'll be tired a while. And then she's going to be a completely different kid. The kind that doesn't have to sit down. Can I see her?" "Soon, a few minutes." She almost smiled. "She asked for you before she went under. You want to know what she said?" He nodded. He couldn't manage words. She said, "Tell my dad the bird worked." Dr. Reyes shook her head, fond and baffled both. No idea what it means. But she was very clear I had to tell you. First thing. His legs stopped holding him. He sat down hard in the plastic chair. He put his face in his grease-clean hands. And he cried, in a way he hadn't let himself cry since the morning he found the roses. When they let him in, she was small in the big bed, hooked to a softly beeping machine, pale as paper. Her eyes opened halfway. "Hi, Daddy. Hi, baby." His voice broke on it. "How do you feel?" "Sleepy. My chest is sore." She frowned, remembering something. "Did it work?" "It worked. The doctor said it went perfect. I told her the bird worked." Her eyes were drifting shut again. "Did she tell you?" "I said to tell you." "She told me." "Good." A long pause. He thought she'd gone under. Then, "Is the porch light on?" "At home." "It's on." "It's always on." "So Mama can see we did it." She smiled without opening her eyes. "Tell her we did it." Eli sat down beside the bed and took her small hand, careful of the tape and the line, and held it while she slept, and did not let go for a long, long time. Nora came home in October. She had a long pink line down the center of her chest. She was tremendously proud of it. She showed it to everyone, whether they wanted to see it or not. The blue spells were gone. She could run the length of the yard now without going to her knees, and she did, over and over, just to feel her own heart keep up with her. A thing it had never once done in 9 years. By the next June, the roses came back the way they always did, red and stubborn along the south fence, where Sarah had knelt to put them in. And the porch light still burned every night, because some habits you keep not out of grief anymore, but out of love. There's a difference. Eli had finally come to know which one his was. It was a Saturday morning in that June when they did it. He'd brought the 6th engine home from the shop on a stand, the one he'd finished, the one Walter never heard. He set it up in the driveway in the good early light. Nora came out in her pajamas, hair every direction, a wren feeder in both hands. The one they'd built together at the kitchen table over a week of evenings. A small wooden thing with a green roof and a perch sized for a small bird. Painted carefully, if not perfectly. A 9-year-old's steady, serious work. "Here?" she said. She held it up to the post at the corner of the porch, a little higher. "So the cats can't get cute." He held the post while she hung it. She stood back and looked at it the way her mother used to look at a finished row of roses, hands on her hips, judging her own work and finding it good. Then they started the engine. He let her press the button. He stood behind her, his hand over her hand, the way his father had once stood behind him. She pushed it. The starter spun, and Walter Drayton's last engine caught, and settled, and found that low even idle. That breathing. That sounded like something large and gentle asleep. Nora laughed out loud. She could feel it coming up through the driveway and into her feet. The nickel, she said. Daddy, the nickel. He gave her the nickel. He'd been carrying it all this time. She set it on its edge on top of the running block, the way she'd watched him do it in front of all those important strangers, her tongue between her teeth. Very careful. She took her fingers away. The nickel stood. On its head. On the idling engine. Balanced on nothing but the steadiness of the thing her father had built. She clapped both hands over her mouth. And that was when the wren came. It dropped out of the maple at the corner of the yard, the way wrens do. Small and brown and entirely unimpressed. It landed on the perch of the little green-roofed feeder Nora had built. It cocked its head at the two of them, and the breathing engine, and the coin standing on its head. And then it opened its throat and sang, loud and bright and far too big for a bird that size. The plainest little bird God made, singing like it was paid to. Right there in the ordinary morning, over the warm idol of an engine a billionaire had thrown away. Nora went still. She reached back without looking and found her father's hand. Eli Brandt stood in his own driveway, his daughter's hand in his father's bird singing on his daughter's feeder, his dead wife's roses red along the fence, the last engine of the only man who ever taught him, breathing low and true beside them, the nickel standing, the morning wide open. He did not say anything at all. He didn't need to. The wren was saying it for all of them.